Hello and welcome back to OCD Coded. I'm Erin Brown. I'm a therapist and I have OCD myself. And my goal with this is to help you learn to turn your OCD into a superpower. You think I get better at doing that? I have so much practice. I keep thinking about changing it up. Let me know your thoughts. But today we're going to be talking about OCD and the nervous system. And I think this is so important in a day and age where we're being asked more and more to speed up and instead of slow down, and it's expected more and more. And I heard somewhere that we experience more stimulation in 1 week than our like people 100 years ago did in their entire lifetime, and just how much bombardment that is. And then that, as well as that, the nervous system, supposed to be in, there's the parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system. And the sympathetic nervous system is more like fight or flight, but that's supposed to be see a tiger, run, and rest. And that the parasympathetic is the rest and digest part where, which we're supposed to be in more often, that the fight or flight is that short-term survival response. But in today's society, mortgages and taxes and, then and just structural society stress makes, where we feel like we're in danger all the time. And that is a really takes a large toll on our nervous system. And I find it to be so important to be considered with it. And it's becoming more and more a part of counseling practices and somatic therapy, which I'm very excited to learn more about, as well as as the disclaimer that I am not a doctor, and so please research this all for yourself and talk to your own doctor about it. But that, as I've learned about a few things, I think they're really helpful because our increased heart rate is such a great key to being able to know when we're stressed, being able to address it in the moment, and a big indicator of all the other things and the quickest way to also switch, stress around and lower cortisol responses and all the kind of hormones or different things that get released in our bodies that cause inflammation, which is a main part of disease and everything is, um, inflammation from cortisol, like that when you're running from a tiger, your body wants to send, wants to break down your body, like your muscles even to be able to feed, to be able to get the energy it needs. It can't just break down, what we eat or those kind of things. And so it's really bad for our bodies. But when we're in that cortisol and that inflammation state all the time, it's been shown to be have very negative effects. And with OCD, as part of that urgency of the fear of the unknown, and it's the reminder that an obsession is a fear. So it's a fear, we're obsessed about a fear, and a compulsion is anything to decrease the distress of the unknown. And so when we're in fear all the time, or in OCD, or in an OCD attack, it can be similar to a panic attack, but also last so much longer. But it's still that kind of elevated heart rate, or heart rate staying the same. And so there's this thing called heart rate variability, or HRV, which is that your heart rate is supposed to go up and down. You see a heart rate monitor and it's like beep, and then it's low and then beep, kind of thing. But it's still the whole idea that, sometimes our heart is supposed to get faster. Sometimes, like when we're doing a strenuous activity or some kind of exercise, or whatever it is, or when we're resting, our heart rate would be lower. And but that with chronic stress there tends to be this kind of flattening of that up and down, where the heart, like feels so, it's almost like the heart feels like, okay, if I can just stay in this range I'll be safe, is how I think about it. But how I mean, I heard some studies at the trauma research conference, which they have, the trauma research foundation.org, if you want to look up a lot of this information for yourself. But that the HRV is directly linked, like, so lowering your heart rate variability, if your heart rate's not going up and down throughout the day and changing when you have stress or not stress, if it's constantly high, or, in that kind of way, or even constantly low from things like depression and everything, that it has really negative health effects. And that even like within 10 years, like someone who had HRV versus who had heart rate variability versus not, showed significant and almost like even close to fatal differences in how that person was doing, and that there's been known to have medications that can affect HRV and that kind of flatten out the heart rate and everything as well. And so, again, always consult with your doctor about it. But I think it's important to be aware of that, that that we want, that our heart is such a central and important part of health, and that we think that our brain sends signals to our heart, like we can think our way into lowering our heart rate. But again, this is research I've heard through the Trauma Research Foundation. It's that the heart sends signals to the brain. And so by doing the breathing and lowering the heart rate and how important that is, and that with people in chronic trauma, that tends to not happen, that their hearts spike higher when something happens, like even a loud noise or something like that, as opposed to they've been working out a long time and their heart rate spikes higher and then it stays up there longer, and that it takes up to 6 months of training your heart to be able to kind of get your heart rate variability back to kind of a natural rhythm in that way. And so I think it is just such one of the central things. And I even used to be like, deep breathing, that can't be the answer. And doesn't, I don't know, but that's our brain telling us that we can think our way through it. And so being able to focus on that first, that when I feel my heart rate elevated, that is a signal for me to pause, no matter what the stimulus was. My heart rate's elevated, I'm going to pause. They have a bunch of cool gadgets you can use, but the whole idea is to try and kind of do box breathing, which is that, the same amount of time in and hold and out and hold. So it's like in, hold, out, hold. So it's making a little box. That's what I thought it was. But that doing that, I mean, Navy SEALs use that. It's shown to be able to lower heart rates and or self-regulate is actually what that is also, the quickest as possible. And so by being able to, okay, when my heart rate's elevated, I'm going to pause, I'm going to do my box breathing, and I can do that while I'm in conversation with somebody. Like I don't have to tell them, I don't have to make the world stop, but I can just notice my heart rate, and that's me checking in with myself, and I don't have to judge it. I can just be like, oh, my heart rate's high. I don't have to judge the whatever made it high, whether that's a thought or a feeling or something that happened externally. The goal is to just be like, okay, my heart rate's high. I'm going to focus on my heart and lower, and then practice the breathing. So be able to lower my heart rate back down. And I want to practice that whether or not I have chronic trauma and low heart rate variability. It's an important skill to practice for self-regulation in every way, and specifically with OCD, because of how much OCD keeps us in fear and keeps that nervous system high. And so this is such a direct way to realize that we can't think our way through these things. And OCD really wants to tell you that it can. And there's a point to where it doesn't mean don't think about anything, but it's being able to that discernment of when is this helping me and when is it no longer helping me to go around in this circle about this? When is it I need to do something about it or soothe myself and cope and be able to work on that. And that's such a personal process. And that's why I think it all starts with the pause and then centering yourself in whatever way you're able to and seeing what do I want to do in this moment, that makes me feel good about myself as a person. And that's kind of the way forward. OCD is such a hard time with that in so many ways about like, well, what does that mean and everything? But each person's personal journey for that and being able to check in with ourselves first and regulate our hearts, I think would lead to a lot more I don't know what the word is, centered, peaceful outcomes to, all the and increase connection to other human beings, which is such an important piece that, like, at the end of the day, we're all flawed humans walking around this planet and but how do I be able to keep that balance between having boundaries, but also having connection? And I think that's a question for us to continue to each answer for ourselves. So I hope that helps, and I will talk to you again soon. Have a good one. Bye.